everyone, welcome back to another episode of Crazy 4. The next few videos will be part of a series where I interview successful individuals for us to learn about the reasons behind their success.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So I've decided to do this interview with you because I'm doing a collection of interviews with successful individuals whose advice and knowledge can be helpful for younger viewers or the youth that watches my YouTube channel, Crazy 4. So I hope you're okay if I post our recording on my YouTube channel.
Very happy to, Manya. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Of course. So before we get started, could you give a little context on your role and your background?
Sure. Manya, I work in Boston Consulting Group. I've been working in consulting overall for the last 23 years. I started my career in management consulting. And I'm an engineer by training. But after my engineering, I did my MBA and joined consulting right from campus. And it's been a wonderful journey for the past, like I said, 2 decades. Now I lead the healthcare practice for India and Southeast Asia. And yeah, I really enjoy the role.
So since you were initially doing engineering, what motivated you to join this field of consulting?
Yeah. So I think at some point when I was doing my engineering, I thought I would go deeper into technical studies and do my MS. But at the time growing up in India, my dad was very clear that he wasn't going to send me away at that young age to US to study. And at that point, just for a lark, I actually wrote because a lot of my friends were, I wrote the common admission test, which was the entrance examination to get into IIMs. And well, it so happened that I got in and I got trapped because once I got in, again, my parents were very clear that it was a very stupid idea to get in to one of the most prestigious management schools in India and not join. So it was kind of a meandering path. It was not a very deliberate choice. And once I was in sort of management school, I developed a whole new perspective. I studied subjects which I had no exposure to: economics, finance, a lot of other topics, strategy, which broadened my horizons. And the reason I actually joined consulting from there was just because I felt that was a job which would sort of give me even more, sort of exposure to different topics, a lot of breadth, a lot of variety. And that seemed exciting at the time because even at the time, I wasn't very clear what I wanted to do. Or I hadn't zoned in a specific field, and consulting just offered breadth, a variety of experiences. And that was the initial motivation, at least.
So from your journey beginning at IIM to now, 2 decades later, what has your trajectory or your career journey been like?
So I joined as as any young management sort of graduate does at an entry level role in at that time McKinsey. And as a result of a combination of personal and professional circumstances, very early on, I ended up moving to the US office. And that's where I started working in pharmaceuticals and healthcare, which is what I feel very passionate about now. But at that time, it was just coincidental because I moved to the New Jersey office, and which is sort of the hub of pharmaceutical industry in US. And I started working on a lot of projects there. And that's where I think was the first time I started developing a deep interest in the sector, having got exposure to working with some of the big pharma companies. So I spent a couple of years there. I came back to India. And at that time, the at least pharma practice of McKinsey in India was very nascent. So having spent a couple of years in US, I was quote unquote an expert. And it started a cycle of continuing to do more work in pharma. I also started enjoying it. It beyond sort of the general, benefits of consulting, also felt it was a sector where I was doing more than a job. I was making an impact on a very important topic for India. And then, a lot of things happened. I got promoted to a project leader, which is the first sort of quote unquote first leadership position, where you start managing a team and you're responsible for, you're accountable for the execution of projects and so on. And then over time, I continued to develop more and more depth in the sector, continue to get promoted. I became a partner about 8 or 9 years ago. A couple of years ago, after spending a lot of time in India, I got the opportunity also to broaden that geography and start covering Southeast Asia as well. And now, very recently, I got promoted to a senior partner and head the India and Southeast Asia healthcare practice.
So once again, just to confirm, what was your switch from McKinsey to BCG like, and when did it happen?
Yeah, so I joined BCG as a senior principal. I was at the time principal in McKinsey. This was 2011. I think after having done consulting for a decade, I was and traveling a lot, having a great journey, but also feeling a bit probably tired of the high intensity career. I thought I needed a break. Also, at that time, my kids were young. My son was 2 years old. My daughter was 5, and I thought it would be a great opportunity to just take a bit of a break and spend more time with them. But somehow at the end of 4 months, I was already done with this break, which I was probably never used to in my life. And while I wasn't actively exploring anything still, there was this urge to get back to something, work-wise, which would be meaningful. And at that time, someone I knew socially quite well at BCG, who used to head Asia for BCG at the time, met me. And over a 2-3 hour lunch, somehow convinced me that I needed to join consulting back. I think other than the fact that I really liked everybody at BCG, the great opportunity that I saw that at the time, BCG in India did not have a healthcare practice. I had obviously done a lot of work in healthcare over the last decade. And, both BCG and I felt that I could come in and create and build something for them. And while there was a lot of familiarity and similarity to what I'd done before, I also saw a new challenge of building something. So it felt very entrepreneurial and being able to exercise new muscles and shape what I wanted to do. And that's when I joined BCG in 2011.
Okay. So other than obviously like facing a challenge with your kids being young, what are some other major hurdles you've faced throughout your career or your journey?
I should say I have really enjoyed the journey, which is obviously, in some ways I've known nothing else. I've only done consulting. But also, it is an intense career in terms of both very fast paced. And, you're always, before you excel a particular level or skill, you're always getting challenged to sort of go to the next level and challenge yourself more. But the very fact that I've been doing this for 2 decades kind of says that I enjoy it. And there haven't been hurdles in that way. Of course, it's also in many ways a career which, allows a lot of flexibility. It's a project-based environment. So, when both my kids were born, I took each time a pretty long break, a 7-month break, which may not be possible in a lot of other maybe jobs which are fast-paced and ambitious, because, if you're not around for 7 months, somebody is going to, then, the organization is going to need someone to come and replace you. But that's not true in consulting. It's project-based. As long as you're completed a project, you take a break, you can come back and start exactly where you left. So I think that's been also a great blessing to have that flexibility over time. I took breaks. I also, did something still quite unusual in India, which is that I was on something called flex time for a number of years when the kids were younger. So even when I joined BCG, I joined at 80% capacity. Which meant that I had somehow my own nobody defined it for me, but sort of time which I could take for myself, for my family, be around my kids and so on. So I don't think there've been a lot of hurdles in that way that have, and I've really enjoyed actually both the professional challenge, but the flexibility it's provided me.
I think that's quite interesting that consulting can give that extra perk that other industries can't. Like I never knew about the project and then you can take a break and then begin a new one accordingly. So other than like any major hurdles in that way, have you ever faced any challenges due to your identity or rather gender, maybe?
I now lead, and I started doing that when I joined consulting. I was one of the 2 women of that joining in that batch, amongst a batch of I think 20-25 people who joined in that batch. So it was a very small number of women at that time who were there in consulting, but also there was a small number of women who were there anyway in business school and also in engineering school. But over time, I felt the need to kind of be able to play a part in broadening that community and make consulting a more attractive place for women. So ever since I think I was a project leader, I started leading. At that time, I used to lead, the Women Initiative in McKinsey. I now lead Women at BCG across Asia Pacific, which is, our effort to make BCG an attractive place to attract, retain women and make them successful. So in many ways, I should say that, it used to be a small community. We are now fairly, I would say fairly at scale. There are many women. I've never quite felt, discriminated with. Some people say, at least on the client end, I still find that at least in India, most clients I deal with are men. There are very few women at the senior management level and in boardrooms and so on. So it's a constant ongoing effort to broaden that community and make everyone's voices heard. Thankfully, consulting is a very supportive career for women. And there is, and they have, consulting only has one asset. There are no products, there are no services, it's only people. And therefore, there is a very ingrained ethos and vision to make sure that you also attract half the talent in the world.
Mm-hmm. So the efforts you talked about in both McKinsey and BCG, like the programs you're conducting or like leading, what effect have they caused at BCG, or like has there been like a certain amount of change that you've observed with gender equity?
I think over the last 7-10 years, there's been a lot of change. So now we have, across Asia Pacific, but also across the globe, our incoming cohorts, we have 40% women across all different, which is, I think we can still go further, but it's actually, a good number to be at, considering that the women from the pools that we recruit in, which is business schools and engineering schools, is still also underrepresented. And those are the things we recruit from. We also have, a third at the middle management level, which is project leaders and principals. We have about a third of our executive committee, which are women. We have women in many, many leadership roles. So we made a lot of progress. Of course, the goal would be that, we hold up half the sky and that it be equally represented 50-50, but we made an absolute. And I think there is a point at which you feel that there is critical mass, that it's not a minority anymore. I think we're at that point, that there is critical mass. Women can look to each other, get inspired, learn from each other's stories, and we are born beyond that critical mass.
Actually, that's quite impressive for BCG, considering like a lot of these companies still in these days like haven't been able to achieve that despite their efforts. Yeah. So what are some practices that you've observed or follow throughout your journey?
In what ways? To say more? What's your question?
Like practices or rules that you stick by working every day.
I don't know if I have any sort of regular practices, but I think what I try to do is kind of not evaluate every week or every day, because it can be, there would be periods of time where you feel that, a week or a month is very intense. But I try to sort of look at my career sort of 6 months, at a time, saying over 6 months, am I both enjoying myself, creating impact, feeling that I'm making a difference to the work I'm doing. So that's one aspect. But the other aspect is also kind of look and say, am I able to balance my different commitments well? So am I also being able to balance my personal commitments, spend time with my family, with my kids, but I don't evaluate on a daily basis. So there are days and weeks which are bad, but then I try to sort of rebalance that over the next few weeks. And I kind of look at it 6 months at a time. That's kind of one thing. I think the other thing is that to keep me excited, I try to make sure that I'm learning something new, every 6 months or so, that I'm taking up a new challenge in terms of, so for example, there is so much change in the environment around us in terms of technology disrupting almost every part of the value chain of healthcare and almost every other sector. So that's a topic right now that deeply interests me, saying how would some of the new, whether it's Gen AI or even AI, how is that going to impact the value chain? During COVID, I did a lot of work in public health and how India health system could sort of fundamentally improve as a result of the challenge that COVID posed, and that was sort of the topic then. So every 6 months or an year, I try to make sure that I'm giving a lot of hours, but in return, is the return also equally fulfilling in terms of personal growth, in terms of the impact I'm making. So those are some general things, but I don't know if I have some strict rules or practices.
No, those are good enough. Other than that, do you have any techniques or advice that you have to encourage female participation within your field or any field? Fair. Yeah.
So I always tell a lot of, and the other good thing about consulting is that you'll work with a lot of young team members, right? So we have sort of 25, 26, 28-year-olds, joining every year, and you work very closely in teams with them. So the one thing, I mean, I learned from them a lot, but the one thing that I always tell them is, or something I would tell even my earlier or younger self, is to say never second guess yourself. So I think a lot of times women, especially, and also men, are second guess themselves or don't take an opportunity when the opportunity presents itself. So that's one thing. Be bolder. If you can dream it, you can do it. And there's a world of opportunities out there. So that's something, I tell myself. And the other thing is just don't be too harsh on yourself. There are going to be many times when you feel that you could have done this better or that better. We work hard enough, and don't be hard on yourself. And, it's also equally important to feel a sense of balance, because if you don't, then at some point you'll drive yourself to the point where you feel burnt out.
Okay. Thank you for the great advice. I think it was very helpful and will be helpful to the viewers as well.
I really enjoyed this, Manya. I hope, this, whatever I shared is going to inspire inspire others. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed the conversation as well.
I did. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Manya. Take care.
Bye.